if you're like me, once the playoffs start, the regular season seems like the most irrelevant thing in the world. Let me make this clear. It's not. It's awesome. But when you get that punch in the face of playoff action, that first round that gives you just so much hockey you can't even keep up, and we're not talking about regular old hockey. We're talking about playoff hockey. It's bigger, it's stronger, it's faster. Well, regardless of what happened during the regular season, it just doesn't seem important anymore. I don't like that. So we're going to try to get ahead of that feeling. The regular season is winding down, so it's a perfect time to take a look at all the major storylines of the year. Now, I'll tell you our original idea. We were going to do the top 5 storylines of the year, but then we had our meeting. I'm sitting there with our producer, Sonny. We've got a big whiteboard, and we're trying to narrow the topics down to 5, and it just wasn't going to happen. We had a big whiteboard with topics like the Lightning, expansion, increased goals, 7 coaches and GMs getting fired, what Nikita Kucherov is doing, not to mention the rookies like Elias Pettersson and Jordan Binnington, and I haven't even begun to talk about the freak show that is Alexander Ovechkin. So, you know what? You're getting more than 5 topics. And we're getting TSN's Craig Button on the show to talk about as many of those topics as we can. But we're also going to speak to Dom Luszczyszyn from The Athletic. And the reason we got him on, he wrote a great piece breaking down whether or not Alexander Ovechkin has a chance to break Wayne Gretzky's all-time goals record. And trust me, he doesn't just say at this pace he has to do it in this many years. He attacks this from every angle. Also, one of the big stories of the week, the CWHL announcing they are shutting their doors, and we will hear from their interim commissioner, Jana Hefford. It's a regular season recap. I'm Rob Pizzo. This is the Hockey Night in Canada podcast.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans, United States and Newfoundland.
That's stopped by Jonathan Quick. Easy
Okay, so when you're looking at the top storylines of the NHL season, you need to find a guest who knows everything about everything. We've had him on before. We're having him on again. Craig Button joining us on the Hockey Night in Canada podcast. How are you, sir?
I am really good, Rob, and you're very kind. There's lots of things I don't know, and you know, it's amazing with social media. You get reminded of it on a daily basis. So I don't have any illusions about what I don't know. That's for sure.
This week, it's all about recognizing everything we saw in the regular season. And Craig, we tried narrowing this down to like 5 topics. I'm going to cheat and go beyond 5 topics. So I want your opinion on each and every one. And
okay.
Let's start right at the top and start with the Tampa Bay Lightning's historic season. For a second, let's kind of just put Kucherov on this team and not talk about him individually, because I'm going to, little spoiler alert, he's a topic unto himself. But 60-plus wins, wire-to-wire winners of the President's Trophy. I mean, they clinched the President's Trophy so long ago, Craig, I forgot when it was. This is just a season for the ages, isn't it?
It is. And when you think about 60-win seasons in the history of the National Hockey League, there's not very many of them. In fact, there's very few. So for the Tampa Bay Lightning to find themselves, you know, in that grouping with you know, not just a great season, an unprecedented season in so many regards, that would save for a couple. And you know, you move forward, and again, everybody talks about the different points of the season, the dog days where it becomes hard, you know, injuries and everything. And the Tampa Bay Lightning they have not lost a beat. You know, they just continue on, and they do it in so many different ways. They do it with really good goaltending. They do it with come-from-behind wins because they have a high-powered offense. They can win the low-scoring games with really good defense. I mean, really what I see, Rob, is a team that is so complete, you know, from every area of their group, that when I look at the playoffs beginning, and I have made this bet. You can take the field. I'm taking Tampa Bay. I think they're that good.
Wow. I mean, and it's not often. You mentioned this is just the third time we've seen a 60-plus win team. And I mean, you're talking about teams like the Red Wings in 96, of course, the 77 Montreal Canadiens, which some would argue is the greatest team of all time. And just, you're right, finding a hole with this team. I mean, not many teams can lose their starting goaltender for about a month and not skip a beat. Not many teams can, say they've got 3 players with 90-plus points on their team. I mean, finding a hole with this team feels damn near impossible.
It does. So imagine that you're trying to prepare for a first-round opponent, and, you're one of those teams that's fighting for that second wild card in the Eastern Conference.
Congratulations.
And now you got to prepare. Yeah. You're sending out your scouts to say, okay, we have to find some holes in this team so we can find a way to try to beat them 4 times. And you're going to try to find areas where you think you can exploit, but it's not about beating them once. You got to beat them 4 times. And, you talked earlier about Vasilevsky being hurt, and it wasn't just but Louis Domingue came in there, and he's not the same level of goaltender as Andre Vasilevsky. So, but Tampa Bay understood that. So they said, okay, we're going to play a little bit more offensive, and we know that we're not going to ask Louis to play the same way as Andre. So we're going to be a little bit more open, and we know we might give up some more goals, but we're not going to let it fuss us. It's almost like a chameleon-like approach, which says, okay, this is what we have today, so this is how we're going to play. And this is what we have tomorrow, and this is how we're going to play. And that is what makes it so incredibly hard to play against a team like that, because they are so complete, they are so adaptable, and they can adjust depending on what the circumstances are. So, when you consider that type of an opponent when you're playing them in the playoffs, to your point, good luck trying to find a weakness, or more to the point, good luck trying to find a weakness that you can exploit to win 4 games and knock them out of the playoffs.
All right, so Tampa Bay in the books. Topic number 2, the return. I'm going to call it the return of goals, because we saw it early on, and I remember, everyone talked about the goaltending equipment being a little smaller and whether that's a factor or not. But for the first time in a long time, Craig, I kind of look at the way the league has gone in a way of no lead is safe, and I love it. As a hockey fan, I mean, we're going to see the league average over 6 goals per game for the first time since 2006. We've seen a crazy amount of games where, a team's up 4-1 in the third period, the other team comes back. Give me a reason. Give me a reason why it feels like the goals are piling up a lot more than we've seen in the past.
Okay, I'm going to give you 3 reasons.
Oh, okay, look at you.
And I'm not going to just and you can put the weighting on them. So I'm going to start with number 1. With the emphasis on skill at younger ages. Okay. The players, the skill level, their abilities to shoot the puck, to make plays, to play at a high tempo and, really dictate a quick pace and threaten. They're learning that at younger ages. And so when that's how you start to learn to play the game, you're not just developing the skills, you're also developing the mindset. And so as these players are coming into the league, this is the way they've played, and this is, how they've trained. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that, hockey operations deserves massive credit in this regard. When they made the crackdown on slashing on the hands a season ago, that had a significant influence on goal scoring, because in 2 ways. Number 1, now players, you couldn't impede a player when he had the puck on his stick in prime scoring areas. And that's how a lot of teams defended against those high-end players. Yeah. So now you don't have that same luxury, and you're now able to make sure that you can get a shot off, and if you don't got good position, those good players are going to be able to shoot to score. The other thing is, when you're being deterred by going into that area and always getting slashed, you're not as willing or is eager to go into those areas. Well, now the players know, if I make a good play to get in there, I'm not going to be slashed and taken down in that regard. So the reward now has become greater for the goal scorers. So I think that has really, really contributed to the goal scoring. And then number 3, you can't just have 3 forwards now in the offensive zone creating offense. You have to have your defenseman involved in it. It has to be a 5-man attack. And those things now where you use more of the offensive zone, where you have all 5 players involved in the offensive attack, I think that leads to more opportunities and leads to more goals. So those are my 3 reasons for goal scoring being up. And I'm like you. I love it. I think that, the skill level, the thinking, the creativity, the imagination, I think it's all great. And, we can talk about the goaltenders. They've been training. They're trying to find ways to keep the puck out of the net. But I think the league is in a really, really good place with respect to the way the game is played and the way skill is being rewarded.
Couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, for me, there was a chunk of time where if your team's down 3-1 in the third period, you see what else is on, or maybe you turn on Netflix for a bit because you think that's it. They're shutting it down. It's going into lockdown mode. Not the case anymore. The comebacks have been great. The goals have been great. And like I said, looking to average over 6 goals for the first time since 2006. Okay, another storyline from this year. I mean, we're a hockey show. How can we not talk about the league that we cover gaining another team, Seattle being rewarded a franchise going to join the league in 2021-22. This seemed like a no-brainer. I felt like this was the worst kept secret in hockey because everything just seems to be perfect for a team there, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, there's a history there, so that's obviously something that is a positive. But we can look at the balance and say, getting another team to have a balanced conference in the East and the West. Those are all good reasons. But when you have people, and first Bill Foley with the Vegas Golden Knights, and now the group that's come into Seattle that say, listen, not only do we want to be part of your league, we feel there's a chance to thrive in this league because of the way it's structured economically, the way the game is being played, where we can get a return on our investment. So they're not only willing to be part of it, they're willing to invest in it with significant dollars. And I think that's a massive, great reflection on Commissioner Bettman and the NHL in terms of the steps they've taken since the lockout ended in 2004-05. And not just ending, everything leading up to the lockout, the time during the lockout to consider how you were going to look at the game and some things that they were going to change, some big, some small, that has made the league a very, very attractive place for potential owners to be in new markets. And then you look at what Vegas did last year and the way they went about it. To your term, no-brainer, like I think it is, but it's a no-brainer because the climate, the economic climate, the financial climate, the on-ice climate is so attractive that's why the NHL is able to do that, and it's a great league to be part of, and I think that's awesome. And there's been tweaks along the way. I just talked about the slashing on the hands, and the league is always looking the 3-on-3 switch ends of overtime. Those types of things. How do we make it a little bit better? How do we look at things that maybe we didn't consider that reared their head in a way that we didn't anticipate? I think those are all the big things of a league, not only identifying some problems, but continuously looking at how to make the product better. I think they've done a fantastic job. And
along those lines, for me at least, I understood there was a point where people were getting a little frustrated with expansion because here's going to be another team that is terrible for 5 or 6 years. And then they decided to change the rules, and we saw it obviously firsthand with Vegas. And I'm not saying that every expansion team is going to make the Stanley Cup final, but giving an expansion team a chance to compete, I think is just so important, because when you're building a fan base, it's really tough to say, please come buy tickets. We're going to suck for 5 years, but trust us, we'll be good in the future.
Well, Rob, you make a fantastic point because, in the competition for the entertainment dollar, you now are starting your franchise in your new market at a real disadvantage. So think about Vegas, and I've said this a few times. Bad shows don't last in Vegas. They just don't, because there's so many different options. So when you consider that the NHL sets an expansion fee and then you have somebody willing to do it, why do you not want to give that person, Bill Foley in this case, every opportunity to put a product out on the ice where he can compete, not just in the league, but within his market? And I think that's where the league, learned from previous expansions it was a long time between expansions. And, and that's a really important thing because, quite frankly, people aren't willing to go spend their hard-earned money on a product that doesn't give them satisfaction in whatever way it is, tangible or intangible ways. And that's really important when you look at expansion. So absolutely the rules were significant and incredibly important for the success of not only those teams, but for the continued success of your league.
All right, next topic, Craig. After a year of seeing no coaches lose their jobs in the National Hockey League season, we've seen 7 coaches and 2 GMs fired. You've been on that GM side. You've had to do the firing. We've seen a lot of teams add that coach with the interim tag. I'll get your opinion on that in a minute. But you look at the teams that made changes: Anaheim, Chicago, Edmonton, LA, Ottawa, Philly, St. Louis. Really, St. Louis is the only ones that really turned things around. But did any of those changes really, really surprise you, or which one really stands out the most for you?
Well, usually coaches get fired because your team is not performing to a satisfactory level. Now, whether your expectations were realistic or not, I think that, that's usually, and in the vast majority of cases, the reason that happens. Now, in the case of Joel Quenneville, his team was .500. Jeremy Colleton has come in, and he's right around .500, just a little bit over since he came in. So, that seems to me to be a move that was done. We needed a change. St. Louis, I don't think there was any question that things were not moving along very well. Edmonton, I think that Todd McClellan lost his job because the expectations in Edmonton were unrealistic, and I think that's why Peter Chiarelli ultimately was fired there. But you go to other places where coaches have lost a job. You look at LA, and you consider that maybe their expectations were high. I don't think they were realistic, but they haven't been a better team since the coaching change. So these things happen. It doesn't always mean that your rationale is right, but it's why they happen. Yeah. And then I think that you have to look, at other areas and say, okay, were we unrealistic? Did we get hit by injuries? Was there other circumstances that led to this? But, again, it was unprecedented last season when there was no coaches fired because you have to think that there was some unhappy people around the league with their team, but it didn't lead to anything. This year, teams were a lot more I shouldn't say eager, that's not the right way to do it, but a lot more ready to hit the eject button. And, I think too, expectations have risen in the league. Teams are spending money significantly in free agency. And, when they start to look at, the investments they're making, they want to see a return on it. And, whether it's realistic or not, that's where the pressures increase on the coaches. And, I think that the coaches all realize, that's the nature of the business.
Real quick before we move on, 5 of those coaching changes came with a coach with labeled interim, the interim coach. I feel like the interim coach is a lot more prevalent now than we've seen in the past. Is there a reason for it, or am I looking too much into this?
No, what I would say is that if you're not sure,
just slap that interim on.
But if you're not sure about who you want your coach to be, right? Like, why do you want to commit longer term with uncertainty? I don't think that's a good business practice. So as long as the coach understands, okay, here's what I'm evaluating with our team. Here's what I want to look at. Here's what I want to consider as you take over this job. And the coach doesn't have to take the interim job. He can say, you know what, it doesn't interest me. But the opportunity to coach in the National Hockey League, the opportunity to get invested and show what you're capable of, and earn the opportunity to be the full-time coach. I think it's no different than any other earning opportunity. When I say earning, a job earning opportunity, and I think that's how the coaches look at it. So I think it's something that's understood, and as long as you're not misleading the coach and saying, hey, if you do a good job, you know what, you're going to be under consideration for the full-time job. As long as you're sincere and straightforward in that regard, I think everybody's okay with it.
All right, moving on. I want to get into some individuals now, and I spoiled this earlier on, but we have to talk about Nikita Kucherov because, I mean, what he's doing in Tampa Bay, I know that whole team's great, but franchise record for points, most points since Joe Thornton in 2006, third Russian who's going to win the Art Ross Trophy, second straight season with 100 points. He's just... And I don't want to call him underrated because I think everyone now knows all about Nikita Kucherov, but I don't think too many people were picking Nikita Kucherov to win the Art Ross Trophy before this season.
No, and that's even when you look back at last year, and even if you look back at the previous years, this is a very prolific offensive player.
A stutter step, a move in by Palat, losing control, greeted there by Orpik, it's loose. Braden Point taken down, Niskanen jumps on it, Point gets it back in front, Palat drops it up, Stamkos across, they score! What a goal! Nikita Kucherov! Magical! And Tampa Bay with a 4-3 lead.
So it wouldn't be out of the realm. I mean, I think what ends up happening, there's this guy that plays in Edmonton by the name of McDavid.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, I know a lot of us haven't, but he's so brilliant offensively, and he wins consecutive Art Ross trophies, and a fantastic season he's had despite the team's woes in Edmonton. I think that's why there's not maybe as many bets on Kucherov to win the Art Ross because of Connor McDavid, but that's the reality. But when you look at Kucherov and look at what he's produced over the last 3 years, 3 full seasons, I mean, he's right there with McDavid. And you play in Tampa Bay, and it's a top team, and they're exciting and they score. But that I don't want to say they're under the radar, but they don't get as much notoriety because there's not as much pub for them, so to speak. And when you watch them play, though, the guy's brilliant. And one of the I don't know what you want to call it, but I made this bet 2 weeks ago, and for fun. And I said it's fun because it's different. And my bet was Kucherov will end up with more points than Tampa Bay Lightning have points. And it's real close. And
wow.
I think it'll go right down to the wire. So my bet was that Kucherov will have more points than the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now consider that the Tampa Bay Lightning very well may be having a season for the ages. Well, they are, but it might even increase more. It tells you how good Kucherov has been and really how great he is.
Absolutely. All right. Next topic is all about the rookies. We've talked so much about Elias Pettersson, and with good reason. I mean, he just flew out of the gates. You were talking about the young players and their skill earlier on, the skill of those young players. He's a perfect example of that. Now, Jordan Binnington's kind of come out of the woodwork and said, hey, you know what? I'm having a pretty good rookie season as well. He just flew out of the gate, 22, 5-1, just incredible. But when you look at the play of these two rookies, forget the Calder Trophy, but we just marvel at what people are doing at such a young age. I know Binnington's a little older, but especially Pettersson.
Well, it is, and not. I mean, Pettersson's 20, but I don't think anybody should be surprised. He led the Swedish Hockey League last year in scoring. He was the leading scorer in the playoffs. He was the MVP in the Swedish Hockey League. So there's so much more capable of coming into the league and contributing. And one of the other factors too, Rob, is that these players from Europe, they play against one another from younger ages. So they're not coming into a league or a style of play that is so vastly different as it once was. So the acclimatization, not that it's easy, but I think it is a little bit easier for the top end players. Now, in the case of Jordan Binnington, you watch Jordan Binnington play. I mean, here's this young man that was right under the umbrella of the St. Louis Blues, and they're having some goaltending woes, and he's been there for a number of years. And finally, they said, "Okay, here, come on in. Let's see what you can do for us." He's been brilliant.
And the Canadians come back 2-on-1. It's Domi and Mete. And what a save! Unbelievable save by Jordan Binnington! And this place is going nuts.
We talked about coaches. Craig Berube's done a fantastic job in there. But Jordan Binnington has been a huge reason for the St. Louis Blues turnaround. And, when you consider the record and consider what he's done in a very, very small time frame, I mean, he has to be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. And, you think about Rasmus Dahlin, the 18-year-old defenseman in Buffalo, and Miro Heiskanen, the 19-year-old defenseman in Dallas. I mean, young players coming in and playing significant roles and performing at a very, very strong level. I mean, it's impressive. And I haven't talked about Svechnikov or Brady Tkachuk, and there's a number of them that are so good, and they're only going to get better.
All right, last one before we let you go, Craig. I want your surprises. I want your the team that surprised you the most positively, and maybe the team that disappointed you. I know there are a lot of candidates. I mean, I had Calgary doing really well this year. I don't know if I had Calgary winning the Western Conference, but man, they've been pretty incredible. But I want your surprise of the year, and I want your disappointment of the year.
Well, how about this? How about if I do one from the West and one from the East in both categories?
Let's do it.
So I'm with you. I thought that I really liked Bill Peters. I thought that was a really good hire for the Calgary Flames. Well, he's proven that clearly. But to me, they're the surprise in the West, because it's not just about finding their way and being in the playoffs. I mean, you're looking at a 50-win season for the Calgary Flames. That's pretty significant.
It is.
First in the Western Conference, that's a huge, huge step forward for them. I believe, and I'm pretty sure of this, is that they have the largest points percentage increase of anybody in the league this year. So they are my surprise in the West. The New York Islanders in the East. I mean, what Barry Trotz has been able to do in Long Island, the worst defensive team in the league to the best defensive team in the league, the Robin Lehner, turnaround, what Lou Lamoriello has done. They lost John Tavares. I mean, this is a team that is showing no signs of falling off at all, and they've been really consistent. So those are my two teams that I've been really, really impressed with in each conference. My call them a surprise, call them most impressed, whatnot. So my disappointments, and in the East, it's the Florida Panthers. I thought the Florida Panthers were poised to take a real step forward this year. They just missed the playoffs last season, and to me, they never did. They haven't taken a step forward. It seems to be a recurring theme in Florida with the Panthers, and something, quite frankly, I think that they have to really examine closely, because you can't just keep going along not having any type of success whatsoever. So I thought after last year that they would really, really take a significant step forward. My disappointment in the West, and it's not Edmonton, because I didn't think that they had a team that was good enough. It is the Anaheim Ducks. And I thought the Anaheim Ducks and I still think they do have a lot of good blend of good young players. And they're going to be able to right their ship pretty good. Because John Gibson's a good goaltender. They have a good group, a good core of good young defensemen. They have a lot of good young forwards coming. We talk about coaches, and it seemed that Randy Carlyle, that his best before date had come, and then you combine it with injuries, and I just think that they're a team that just could never find their way this year. And really, I thought that they were capable of being in the playoffs, but they're the team that really fell short, in my view, considering what they have in terms of player personnel, and I think that's why Bob Murray made the change behind the bench.
Let me get this straight. You claimed off the top of this interview that you don't know everything. You not only answered all of our questions, but every time I asked you, you said, you know what, I'm going to give you more than what you asked for. And that's why, Craig, we call you to come on this show. Thanks so much.
Rob. I really, really enjoy. I mean, you are so dialed in, and you're passionate and really good. So to me, to be able to take part in this with you, it really is truly a pleasure.
I'm blushing. People can't see it because it's a podcast, but I'm blushing, Craig. Thanks so much for doing this. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the playoffs.
I will, Rob. You enjoy them also.
Nice send in. Ovechkin fires. Missed it high. Alex Ovechkin reloads. Score! Ovechkin golden again. That's number 50.
Okay, so you may have noticed one topic I didn't discuss with Craig Button was Alexander Ovechkin. What Ovi has done this year is beyond ridiculous. I've even referred to it as bananas, and I think that's pretty accurate. 50 goals for the 8th time. One more, and he ties Wayne Gretzky and Mike Bossy for the most all time. He's going to lead the league in goals for the 8th time, breaking a tie with Bobby Hull. And did I mention the guy is 33, and this is his 14th season? And that age-old question coming up. Can he catch Wayne Gretzky and his goals record of 894? So I'm sitting at my desk this morning and reading an article on The Athletic, and it broke this topic down perfectly. The man behind it was Dom Luszczyszyn, who is joining us now on the Hockey Night in Canada podcast. Dom, thanks so much for coming on.
No problem.
Okay, first off, you're not the first guy to write about this topic, but in my opinion, you broke it down in the best way. You've got graphs, you've got charts, you've got everything you need to kind of really look at this properly. Before we get into that, though, let's just start with this season. I know you said in your piece that you made some predictions about what you thought Ovi would do this year, and he's exceeded yours and pretty much everyone's predictions, hasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. He's 33, so anytime you do predictions, you got to factor that in. I have an age curve when I do my fantasy hockey projections, and I thought Ovi could still be a 40-goal scorer, but I didn't expect him to do 50. Not that it wasn't possible. It was just unlikely for a man of his age, and he was slowing down a couple of years ago, but it seems he's right back up to where he was at his peak.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting when you look at this argument, this can he catch Gretzky? Dom, there are two people who really break this argument down. You got the people who use that age-old sentence, if he keeps up this scoring pace, and then you got people who throw way too many analytics at you, and it kind of just gets confusing. Your eyes go cross-eyed. You're kind of in between, which I really enjoyed. But talk a little bit about the age curve, because I find not enough people talk about this, that yes, people get older, and when they get older, their production declines, but you've also got drops of ice time. You've got how many games they're going to play. You've got to take all that into account, don't you?
Yeah, and that's really difficult to do 5 or 6 years in advance, which is what you need to see if Ovechkin has the potential to beat Gretzky's record. And for him, he's generally in good shape. He always plays 20 minutes. He is just an excellent physical specimen, really, and he's got that spot on the top power play that I don't think he will give up.
Yeah.
And if you factor in all those things, it's easy to see him continuing to score at a high rate well into his late 30s. Not at the same rate, although you never know with Ovechkin. But his days of scoring 50 are probably over, though we could have said that last year as well. But he can still probably score 40 or 30 for the next 4 or 5 years, which is insane to think about given his age, and it could be what pushes him into that conversation of can he beat Gretzky's record.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and you portrayed that in the graph where I think a lot of people, like I said, some people look at it as, if he keeps up this pace, that's not the case. You have to look at somebody as they kind of decline with age. And in the graph, it gets right down to the point where once he gets to about 41 years old, he needs about 15 goals. Those are realistic numbers to me. I mean, how did you kind of break down those numbers? How did you get to the fact that, you know what, we can legitimately say his numbers will go down each year?
There was an article, I think 4 or 5 years ago by Eric Tulsky, who's the analytics guy in Carolina now, who kind of sort of introduced the concept of age curves to like a national hockey audience. And I've been sort of using that in my own work of trying to estimate how much a player should drop off in a given year. And I sort of applied that to Ovechkin year after year. So if he scores over 50 this year, based on his age, based on maybe if he gets a minute reduction next year and how many games played he's supposed to get, then maybe he'll score around 44 next year, and then you do the same thing for the year after and the year after that, and then by age 41, it's probable that he's around a 15-goal scorer if he's still playing, although there's just, because it's so far ahead in advance, there's a lot of margin for error in both directions. Maybe he's not playing, maybe he somehow defies age even more at age 40. It's hard to say at this point, but based on what he's shown and how players typically age, that's the best guess for what we can expect from him at that age.
And it's tough guessing, right? And I know you mentioned this in this piece. Even trying to predict how many goals someone's going to score over the next week can be really tough. But for me, what we're seeing from him, Dom, is we got a guy in his 14th season, and he's leading the league again in goals. It's going to be 6 of the last 7 years. And you look at someone like Wayne, who led the league in goals for the last time in his career in his 8th season. This is unprecedented. This is, by this point, ordinarily, a player is not only on the decline, but well on the decline, whereas Ovechkin doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. And I know a lot of people are going to bring up the era argument, and I think it's a fair one. Gretzky played in the highest scoring era of all time. But to me, that's the difference between Ovechkin and Gretzky, is that Ovechkin's doing this with bigger, stronger, better goalies in an era that has nowhere near as many goals.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing for the era is also it's probably easier for Ovechkin because science is at its best and players can last longer now, but you also see younger players taking over older players at a faster rate as well. So it is genuinely amazing that he's still doing this at age 33 when at the beginning of the season everyone's like, okay, it's Laine's time to shine, it's Matthew's time to shine, Ovechkin's not going to win the scoring race again, and there he is again.
Yeah. Just keep doubting him, and he keeps doing it. It's funny. Recently on our webpage, cbcsports.ca, and on our YouTube page, I did a video called 9 Reasons Alexander Ovechkin is now the greatest goal scorer of all time. And I even put it in the video, cards on the table. I grew up idolizing Wayne Gretzky. And the venom I got spewed on me was, and I'm sure you're used to this, you do things online, no matter how good your work is, people are going to say negative things about it. But it got me to the point where, and maybe you can agree or disagree, I think people are reluctant to do this only because it's Wayne Gretzky. I mean, I think it's almost sacrilegious, especially in Canada, to say that anyone is better than Wayne at anything. And I don't think we're trying to say that Alexander Ovechkin is a better hockey player than Wayne Gretzky. This particular skill set, to me, the way you ended your piece was right. It's really not even an argument anymore, is it?
No, I don't. I really don't think so. Not because with the era that Ovechkin has had to play in. If you, like Hockey Reference has era-adjusted goals, and Ovechkin is already top 5 all time, and the gap between him and Gretzky is much smaller than it is between actual goals. And I know that's an argument that's difficult for some people to stomach because it's an adjustment, not actual goals, and that's why I think it's important for Ovechkin to actually break the record. But in my mind, even if he doesn't, he's already shown enough against much better goaltending in a much tougher league, just a more difficult context, that he is the best goal scorer of all time.
I'd argue with you if I could. I can't. I put him right up there at number 1. Dom, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Go check it out. It's on The Athletic. It's just exactly like I said. I read it this morning. I thought, this is it. Let's get him on the show. Thanks so much, Dom. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, guys, before we go, we did have some big news from the world of women's hockey. I know this is an NHL regular season, but this was just massive. The CWHL announcing they're going to shut down as of May 1st because they said their business model has, quote, proven to be economically unsustainable. We've talked a lot about women's pro hockey on this show, in fact, many occasions on this show, specifically with the need for this game to grow to have one league. This was not what we meant. Obviously, fans, people involved with the game, they wanted a merger of the two leagues. Now, Jana Heffert was the CWHL's interim commissioner, and she appeared on CBC Radio's Ottawa Morning. Here's what she had to say.
Well, I think, first of all, it was an incredibly difficult decision we had to make. And as we have an 11-person board with a lot of great expertise, and as we looked into this model, we decided it's just not viable. To cover expenses, we receive sponsorship dollars from corporate Canada and other sports leagues and teams' revenues from ticket sales, merchandise, as well as donations from the public. And it's clear that this economic model is no longer sustainable despite our efforts to renew funding from the various sources.
What led to that economic unsustainability?
Well, as I said, we receive money for all these various sources, and you can look at attendance numbers, you can look at merchandise sales, we can look at corporate sponsorship, and we want the game to grow. And the idea of, cutting back on the growth that we've had is not an option. We want to see it grow, and we believe that the players deserve more, and we think that there's got to be something better for the players out there.
And not long after that news broke, the NWHL, the other league, announced they would be expanding into Toronto and Montreal, two cities that had CWHL teams until this week's news broke. Something tells me we are far from done with this story. Something tells me more is going to come out in the coming weeks. We'll keep you updated on all of that, but just not good news. I was blindsided, and I thought maybe some of the players and coaches and GMs maybe had an inkling, but from what we have heard, they were blindsided as well. So like I said, a lot more coming out of this story. All right, you know what time of the show it is? Social media time. And we're talking about the biggest storylines of the year. And we asked you a pretty simple question. What is the biggest storyline of the year? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When we looked at our topics, we angled it a little more towards the positive. Some of the things to celebrate in the regular season. I have a feeling some of the things online that you maybe sent to us don't always have the squeaky clean sunshine and rainbows feel to it. But you know what? That's what this segment is for. So let's go through some of these. You know what? We might as well start off this way. D. Parocini. I'm going to make the same apology I do each and every week. I apologize if I butchered your name. One word. Gritty. You know what? I don't know if I've seen a mascot get this much notoriety and popularity, but Gritty has certainly done that. Mahad A27 says Habs and New York Islanders making the playoffs despite being predicted to finish second last and last respectively. I think that's a really good one. We still got to hold out on the Habs, but the Islanders for sure. Put it this way. If you're a fan of the Islanders going into this season, you lost your best player, hands down, plain and simple. You lost your best player. You get this coach who, of course, is the coach who helped win he led the team to the Stanley Cup in Barry Trotz. And Barry Trotz turns this team around specifically on defense. They went from being the worst defensive team in hockey to the best. And now they're in the playoffs. One of the great stories, and that's why everyone kind of considers Barry Trotz for the Jack Adams Trophy. Will Umet says, Ottawa trading entire team. A few people wrote in about Ottawa. Johnny9927 said the fall of the Ottawa Senators. They went from one goal away from the Stanley Cup final to this. M. Brown 83, the Senators, the owner, the Uber video, the trades of their best three players, also potentially giving away that first pick to the Avalanche. Yeah, it hasn't been a good year for the Ottawa Senators. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The Uber video, we can't forget the cyberbullying scandal with Mike Hoffman and Eugene Melnyk. I mean, I really believe this whole team needs to shut up completely at this point. Everything they do right now is just going to be spun negatively, or it's just going to be negative. I mean, we talked about Guy Boucher, the way he was let go, the timing of when he was let go. Nothing this team has done this year has looked good publicly. So, yes, I definitely agree that they are, as a whole, one of the biggest storylines of the year. But I also think that it's just time for them to shut up and have a complete clean slate for next year. And just not be the laughingstock of the league. Because right now, unfortunately, they are. N. Short says, St. Louis Blues rise from last place January 6th to the playoffs. That's a really good one. A few teams really came back from the dead, but wow. The St. Louis Blues, they were such a sexy pick before the season. They made a whole bunch of changes in the offseason. A lot of people had them, finishing really high in the division. And then stumbling out of the gate isn't even a fair assessment of what they did. They fell flat on their face. And when the clock strikes 2019 and you're dead last, and now you've punched your ticket to the playoffs, you're moving up to second in the division. What a story that has been. A lot of people wrote in about the Lightning, which is fair. Luke Lehman 91 on Facebook gave us 17 storylines. 17. Let's see which ones we got. He said freaking Tampa. Yeah, I can say that. We got that one. The Flames being playoff bound. We touched on that. The Sabres looking good and then messing it up as always. Yeah, we want to talk about the St. Louis Blues being dead last and then now going into the playoffs. When we did we not do a show where we talked about the Buffalo Sabres being one of the feel-good storylines midway or around December? Because they were. Jordan Binnington, JT. Luke, this is a lot of topics. Thanks for taking the time. But I think we've hit almost all of these. Yeah. Thanks for writing in. Cody Hewen says, how bad the playoff format is. We get two top teams in Boston and Toronto playing each other, and Montreal, Columbus, and Carolina all fighting for a spot with 94 to 95 points at the moment. But they would all be playoff teams if they were in the West. First versus 8 would be nice, but ideally 1 versus 16 is where the league should be at. Tampa should be playing the weakest team playing in the playoffs. Cody, you're not the first person to bring that up. First off, you're not the first person to complain about this playoff format. I think a lot of people are just not ecstatic with it, even though in theory I understand why it was implemented. Rivalries are what makes sports go round, and this playoff format is designed to have the Torontos and Bostons meet multiple times in the playoffs. People love it. People love to hate Boston in Toronto and vice versa. And I understand how that works, and I understand why the league decided to do it. I'm a fan of 1 versus 8. Personally, I wouldn't mind going back to that. 1 versus 16. The only problem with the 1 versus 16 is that you are taking out the element of East versus West in the final. You could have 2 West, you could have 2 East once the whole thing shakes down. Which, think about every other sport, you still have your 2 conferences or whatever it is meet in the final. Baseball, you're going to have the American League winner against the National League winner. NBA, East versus West. The NFL, AFC versus NFC. It's just kind of the way it is. Connor Ty Desley says, if you think it's any team other than Tampa Bay, you're high. Kucherov, who was drafted 58th in 2011, is having the highest scoring season by any active NHL player. The team is one of only 3 teams ever to win 60 games, and John Cooper is only the second coach to do such. You don't have to like them, but you can't deny history in the making. I don't think we have. We've talked about them at length over the last 2 shows. I think it's really, really, really cool what we're seeing with this Tampa Bay team. You're right. Second coach, Scotty Bowman was the other coach to do it for the other 2 60-win teams, the Habs and the Red Wings, both coached by Scotty Bowman. So think if you're John Cooper. In the history of the National Hockey League, I'm one of 2 coaches to have done this. That team, as Craig Button said earlier in the show, 0 holes. Absolutely 0 holes. Finally, our last one, YYC Sean saying, I think the Flames, there are new players and they have a new coach, and they didn't make the playoffs last year, and now they have clinched best in the Western Conference Pacific Division and are also second overall in the league. Another reason is their new goalie, David Riddick, who might not be the starter but has performed well in his first season, and the coach turned many players to be even better and even improved guys like Gio, Johnny, Monahan. I definitely think they are the story of the year from being so low to becoming so high in the standings. Thanks for the message, Sean. I agree they are definitely one of the stories. The only issue with them is I don't think too many people are shocked. I don't think a lot of people thought they'd do what they are doing, but hopes were high in Calgary going into this season. Bill Peters, you're right, is a great coach. I'm really curious to see how this team does in the playoffs. For me, Mark Giordano is the Norris Trophy winner. If you watch just one Calgary game, you realize he does so much more than just contribute on the score sheet, which I know we did awards last year, guys, but unfortunately, I know we did awards last week, guys, is what I meant to say, but too many times the Norris Trophy ends up going to the highest scoring defenseman in the league, not necessarily the best defenseman. And in my opinion, Mark Giordano was the best defenseman. As always, guys, thank you so much for the messages. You keep them coming. I'll keep reading them. Okay, before we go, I want to mention this. If you're a sports fan, and I'm assuming you are if you're listening to this podcast, and you want to hear some really cool stories about athletes on the field and off the field of play, you have to listen to the Players' Own Voice podcast. It's hosted by Anastasia Busis, who is a two-time Olympian. Trust me, she knows what she's talking about. And what I really like about this podcast, it looks at athletes as human first, athlete second. Not too many podcasts do that. And it sheds some pretty intimate light on some of your favorite athletes. So download CBC Sports' Players' Own Voice podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. The Hockey Night in Canada podcast is a CBC Sports production. Remember, if you mention us on social media, use the hashtag Hockey Night in Canada podcast. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, see those 5 stars? Yeah, click the 5th one all the way to the right and leave us a review. We want to hear from you. Put nice things about us or just suggestions if you have something you want to hear on the show. Big thanks to everyone involved with the show. Sunil Thakur-Karan is our producer and the guy who makes me look and sound good each and every week. Sophia Jurkstovich is our features producer. Laura Antonelli is our technician. And Graham McDonald is our sound mixer. I'm Rob Pizzo. You can find me on Twitter, ROBPIZZO. Feel free to leave me a message there as well. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.